Welcome to the Mothman in the Bible Belt podcast with your host, Buck Fantastic.
Girl Scout cookies.
On this week's episode of the Mothman in the Bible Belt podcast, we're talking child homelessness in West Virginia. I have Beth Scohy, the Director of Training at Daymark, and Dr. Perry Blankenship, the former Attendance Director and Homeless Liaison for McDowell County Schools, discussing the face of child homelessness in West Virginia and possible solutions. Controversial solutions. After listening to this podcast episode, I'm sure many of you will rethink your church and charitable giving. I know I will. Join me, your host, Buck Fantastic, for another exciting episode of the Mothman in the Bible Belt podcast. Starting now. According to West Virginia Board of Education's website, there were 10,417 homeless students in the state last year. In 2019, before COVID-19 hit, there were 10,522. It's a decrease of 105 students. What does the child homelessness population look like in McDowell County, Perry, and in Kanawha County, Beth, that y'all are dealing with?
So in McDowell County, when you talk about recording homeless, you have to consider what that definition entails, because homeless has a variety of definitions to it. That doesn't mean necessarily that person's living out on the street in a cardboard box, because we say homeless. So we may say that this person is doubled up with a family member, so there's two families in the same home. They may not be in their own home, but be in transit. So a student may be going from couch to couch, staying with friends. So there's a variety of things when you're looking at that position and that definition. McDowell County has a high rate of students who live with someone other than their biological parents. So that's probably over 50%. And so there's a lot of those students that take up that category. And it's usually related to drugs, parents who just completely disconnect for those reasons.
Beth?
Well, I would agree with everything that he said. Then there's also youth who are in foster care.
Yes.
And so that's a population as well. As he said, we call them couch surfing youth.
Mm-hmm.
They're not living outside in a box. They may not go to a shelter on their own. They instead will go to a friend's house and stay, and the parents might not even know what's going on. And they'll stay there until the parents says, why are you still here? Should I call your mom? No, I'll go home. And then they go to the next friend.
Yes.
So we have, that has kind of taken the place of the traditional runaway that we used to see, back in the 70s and 80s. An after school special, kid ran away from home and got on a Greyhound bus and went to New York and, became a prostitute. That's the after school special that I saw, now those youth go to a friend's house or go stay with grandma or an aunt or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of getting on I guess we got the message out that was really dangerous to be out on the street for kids.
The feds have two definitions, one from HUD and the other from the Department of Education. On a national level, by HUD's definition, 580,466 people experienced homelessness last year. It jumped 2.2% since 2019. 171,575 people were in families with children. During HUD's 2020 point-in-time count, there was 115 persons with at least one child, an adult, in West Virginia. Couch surfing, doubling up, no longer counts as being homeless under HUD's current definition, do y'all think that it
Wow.
should? Or is it painting an inaccurate definition if you're saying that since you're technically housed, but you don't own or you're not paying rent, you're not paying a mortgage on that,
Well, I'm not sure what HUD is why they're, I'm sure they have a reason for that number. But a kid, will say that's 13, 14 years old. We're not going to put them in an apartment. A traditional homeless shelter, the focus there is going to be finding someone housing, finding a job, housing, and getting them set up to live on their own. You're not going to do that with a 14-year-old, at least not in 6 weeks' time. So that when you're talking about children, your focus is going to have to be different. With children, your focus is going to be more keeping them safe. Would you agree with that, Doctor?
I would, depending on the situation and circumstances. For HUD's purposes, I don't think that HUD really looks at youth the way that we look at youth. I think they're more focused on adults. So I would say that's the reason that definitions come into play. Because an adult living with a relative can go out and function and find job and find work and have shelter. But when we're thinking about how do we meet the needs of youth, if I have a youth that's couch surfing, I need to be able to help support that youth. Now, there's many different reasons for that youth to be couch surfing. It could be maybe there's domestic violence in the home. And so, they're trying to escape that domestic violence. And so if they're not labeled in the school system as homeless, then the funding that I have to help purchase clothing and other items for that youth goes away. So I don't know that I would agree with HUD's definition as far as it entails for the school system. But as far as housing, I may go along with that because, like I said, adults are a little bit different.
Kanawha County had 622 homeless students last year. The previous year, they had 652, a drop in 30 students. Kanawha is the second in the state when it comes to child homelessness. Jefferson County is the worst with 1,206 homeless students last year. The year before, Jefferson County had 1,411 homeless students. McDowell placed 17th in the state when it comes to homeless children. McDowell County Schools had 206 homeless students last year and 149 in 2019. That's a 57 student increase. Have y'all noticed that big time, Perry?
We have, and our population is different. So when you're thinking about students per capita, so if you're thinking about Jefferson County, their population is big compared to our population. So when you're thinking about 200 and some students in a population of only 17,000 and some people, that's a big number because that's a big percentage of your population that's considered to be homeless. And so it does impact the students. It's impacting their ability to stay, in the education system. It's impacting their ability to get the things that they need to become successful citizens, as we might say. So it's a big turnaround for us. And like I said, they're leaving for different reasons. What I find a lot of times is a lot of them are trying to escape something that they want to get away from, because you talk about drug addictions. How do you get away from a family that's dealing drugs unless you literally just leave the family? So there's many different challenges and variety of things that we're looking at. So yes, it's a big impact.
How do y'all feel the state of West Virginia prioritizes children when it comes to putting a dent into child homelessness and poverty? Like, child poverty in the state's 20%. Pretty bad.
That's tough because you're not going to get a kid. When you say child, and I'm assuming we're not, we're talking about under 18, and child, that, like, we're talking about 6-year-olds too. What are you going to do? The assistance or the education, the culture, that all is going to have to come from the parent. A child can't really do anything about their poverty, honestly. I mean, yeah, a 16-year-old can get a job, but they're probably not going to get one that's going to pull them out of poverty. So that child poverty is going to have to, the solution to that is going to have to be aimed at parents, not children.
And you have to think about the definition of poverty too, because we have working poverty. So we have families that are working, but they are working at such a place with such low income, raising their children that they're considered in the poverty area. You would take probably just about anybody working in a minimum wage job would definitely be considered poverty. We know that that's increasing. We know that that's getting a little bit better. The only downside to that is the economy is going to increase with that, so they're still going to stay in poverty. So thinking about youth, we are blessed to live in a state where that the state itself may not always be able to hit every avenue, but we have a lot of people who are willing to have good hearts. I know in McDowell County we have a book of resources of clothing closets, food pantries. The schools are hitting it at every angle. I know they send home backpacks to feed these kids, on the weekend. There's if they know that kids need clothing. So I think the people step up and do a lot more than what people realize that they're doing. So as far as the state, I agree with Beth. I think the state's probably doing just about everything they can as far as the youth goes. The focus then turns back to adults for them.
And it takes a whole generation to cycle through that too. You're going to have to get a generation of kids, or that are going to go, that are going to enter college, apprenticeships, get good paying jobs, and then have their own kids, and then those kids hopefully will not be in poverty. And there are people out there that help. I think that it's important that the people that need the resources know about them, because I think there's a disconnect there, and in my one of our programs works with homeless young adults, and they're from 16 to 21. And especially when they leave us, I work very hard to stay in contact with them and let them know what's out there. It's not just really enough to say, get a job, get an apartment, and here you go, but to let them know when they get into trouble, who they can call in the community and where they can go to get more help.
Yeah. I think Beth alluded to a big topic there. We have to change the way people look at things. So changing the generation. And I know coming from the school system, I can tell you that a lot of our parents do not value education. And so they don't see the importance in their child going. We have generational families who are what we call generational check seekers. They look for a check early on, and they plan to live on that check, and their child live on those checks for the rest of their life. And so one of the things that McDowell County is doing, Amanda Payton there in the Board of Education has, it's a home visitation program. And so they have teachers who go out to the homes and work with the parents and the grandparents to try to establish dreams and goals with these parents and help them to see how their child can accomplish these dreams and goals and be successful. And so I think changing the mindset is going to be a big piece.
Do y'all think raising the minimum wage would help as well?
I don't know.
I don't, for the simple reason, when the minimum wage gets raised, the economy is going to raise with it. If you look back through history, you'll see that the economy raises to a match and go above any raise that we give to minimum wage. The downside to that is those people who have established wages, like me, for example. I have established wage. As the economy increases, my net value decreases. So I have less buying power. So actually, it's pulling more people towards the poverty level instead of bringing people away from the poverty level.
Right, right. Because people like me that are, say, 50 and up, I'm probably not going to make a whole lot more than I'm making now.
Uh-huh.
So if McDonald's raises the minimum wage and my Big Mac costs more, I'm going to buy less Big Macs.
Yeah, your buying power gets lost. So we're making a disadvantage for families because we're pulling families more towards a more poverty-stricken ideal. When you go back and you look at some of the original ideals of minimum wage jobs, they were not designed for families to live on.
Right.
Minimum wage jobs were really designed for high school students and college students to offset their finances while they were gaining education.
But a lot of people are living on them.
Yeah, that's what we've done. A lot of people have now turned around and tried to raise families on that, and that's not what it was originally designed for.
How do y'all think we address increasing wages while stabilizing costs that everybody, utilities, food? How do y'all think we should go about doing it so that we don't have a problem with poverty and we don't have a problem with homelessness? Because something's got to give. The per capita income from 2019 is like $26,480 in West Virginia. That's not a lot for someone to live on, or a family.
It's not, but here's the thing. If we're not careful by raising minimum wage, look at what's going to happen with the stores. We already see it at Walmart. They have self-checkout lines. In order to cut costs, that's what's going to happen. They're going to cut out people and use more automated systems to run these systems so that they can maintain their level of finance. I mean, you've got to have, if you're a business person, you know that you got to have so much revenue. All right. And we already know that there's fully automated restaurants running overseas. In order for me to go buy that Big Mac, Beth, they're going to have to make it automated for me to be able to afford it. Because I can tell you right now, like yesterday, I went to Taco Bell to buy something just for me. 3 soft tacos and 1 gordita cost me almost $15.
I was going to say lunch is $15.
Yeah. And think about that. For me, and I make decent finances, for me, that's pretty big for lunch. Imagine a family of 4 trying to do that. So we have to look at pros and cons to everything. And I agree, because now I'll tell you, I came from the poverty area, but we have to help find ways to get these people beyond just a minimum wage job to where they can increase in life. Because I don't think us just raising money is going to make it better. I don't see how we can sustain cost and raise finances at the same time. Because for me to pay, and I want you to think about this, for me to pay somebody $20,000 a year, by the time I get their benefits and all that other on top of there, you're talking $50,000-$60,000 that I'm actually paying out every year for this person.
But I think part of it, and I know that probably the school system is in McDowell County is doing it just like the school system is here, and like the youth care systems, we're trying to, while kids are in our care, we're trying to get them educated.
Mm-hmm.
That's like one of our biggest program focuses is you have to go to school, and getting them some sort of post-secondary education as well. Get into community college, get into an apprenticeship. College is great. I went to college, but it's not for everybody.
It's not.
And, and we need plumbers and we need electricians.
Yes, we do.
And so and we have a couple of our young adults that are in a program for phlebotomy and EKG, to work in healthcare. And so we encourage that so that when, they're 20, they can get a job someplace that's not Taco Bell.
Uh-huh.
That they can get a job at a hospital, in a doctor's office. I have a young lady now who's working on her CNA certified nursing assistant program, is working. It is part-time, but it's like 35 hours a week. It's not quite full-time, but she's working in an assisted living facility, and she's working on getting her CNA, and she's 18. So, hopefully by the time she's 20, she'll be making pretty decent money.
Yes.
And
I think
encourage those things.
I think one of the things that could be changing the school system is when I worked there, because I've been a school counselor, school psychologist, so I've worked in several areas. I think one thing would help, and I think it would reduce the dropout rate and increase our success rate, is if they started the technical schools in middle school. Because I had boys and girls who academically, just like Beth said, we knew that academically they weren't going to go to college. But man, they could tear a car apart and put it back together. They could tear a motorcycle apart, put it back together. They could build a house. If we would start instilling that into them in middle school, 6th, 7th grade, and let them build those skills, because I used to be a carpenter, I used to build houses. You make decent money building houses. You can make decent money being a carpenter or mechanic or plumber. So I think getting that mindset into them early on, I think would increase that. And especially you're going to find out a lot in poverty stricken families that the dropout rate is a lot higher.
And this just popped into my head, so I'll just go ahead and say it, and hope I'm not saying anything controversial here. But military, increasing the encouraging people to go into military, because they're going to learn valuable skills there. And that is something that they'll have that forever. And, even without a GI Bill, with a GI Bill or without a GI Bill, and coming out of that, then especially if they don't know exactly what it is they want to do, because that's hard, when you're 18 and okay, what are you going to do the rest of your life? But to go into the military, and the military will help them figure that out.
Yes, it will. I'm 100% service-connected veteran, so I agree, Beth. And it is a good place for a lot of people. It's not something for everybody, but I can tell you this: you can look on my wall behind me. The military is what helped me get those degrees that's hanging on the wall behind me, because they helped pay for my education. They helped encourage me to go for education. I am the first person in my family who went to college. And those ideals and those thoughts of being able to be successful came from my military service.
And while during that 4 years or 6 years or 8 years or 10 years or whatever, they're not homeless.
No, they're not.
They
may feel like it sometimes.
They might be on a boat out in the middle of the ocean.
Out in the tent on bivouac, yeah.
But they're not homeless.
When it comes to homeless children and youth, what demographics are you seeing? Homeless white, black, Latinx, Asian American, Pacific Islanders, LGBT, children with mental health or developmental disabilities, or is it just a mixed bag?
For McDowell County,
yeah,
it's pretty even across the board. I mean, it's impacted all of them. There's poverty has not been blinded to, and it's not hit one area more than others. So it's across the board for us.
Yeah, when you went down your list, my answer would have been yes. It's because we're in West Virginia, where we don't have a large Pacific Islander population.
Right.
Then that's not a big demographic for us. But, black, white, yellow, green, purple, whatever, I don't think homelessness is colorblind.
No, it's not.
Nor is poverty.
Beth, how many of the young people that you come across with New Connections and Daymark in general are experiencing child abuse and neglect?
Oh, most. I mean, almost. If they haven't been a victim of it, then they've seen it. They've seen domestic violence. They've definitely witnessed it, or they've been a victim of it. Maybe not 100%, but a very high percentage. And it's that trauma that has, when we talk about the education, the trauma that they've experienced when they experienced the abuse, when they experienced the neglect, when they saw it, that's all traumatizing. And we know now, that has an impact on the growing and the developing brain.
Yes, it does.
And so that, that impacts the education, and that impacts the future. So I'd say almost all, maybe not all, but if not abuse, then definitely neglect. Almost
What about you, Perry?
Well, I'll say it this way. That's one of the reasons that brought me back to full-time mental health again, because I see that in our culture, a lot of the abuse and the neglect is so been culturally ingrained that people no longer see it as that. It's almost, well, this is natural. This is what we naturally do. So for students to report to me abuse and neglect, they witness on the same rate as they might somewhere else where this has already been taught, this has already been spotlighted, that this is not appropriate and good. And what I mean by that is this. I watch the students coming into the school system, the males, how they treat the teachers, the female teachers. In their home, women are subservient to men. So that becomes an automatic way they talk to women. And so that's abuse. But, is that being reported that way? So I would say that the majority, I agree with Beth, the majority of my students, I guarantee you, are experiencing or at least seeing abuse and neglect.
How much of these young people that y'all are working with who are homeless youth are dealing with substance abuse issues themselves?
I'll let you talk first, Perry. Maybe I'll figure out how I want to.
Okay.
I know it's bad with adults. I figure it's just as bad with youth.
So if you come to McDowell County, we were flooded with opioid issues. I mean, I work for Day Report down there, so I do substance abuse groups too, and it's flooded. And the youth, to have a kid in elementary tell us that they're experimenting with drugs is no surprise, because again it's become something that's cultural. When I was in the middle school, my boys and girls, I mean, when I talk to them about staying in school and getting a job, they're starting to tell me about their aunts and their uncles who sell drugs, who have boats and cars and trucks and, I mean, four-wheelers, and so they see it as something lucrative, and they see it as something good, and of course, when you live in a rural area like McDowell County, there's not a lot of things to offer to these youth to do. So what's the next thing they do is drink and do drugs. And so, yeah, I think it's pretty prevalent.
Although I will say, and that by the time they're, you're talking about the grade school kids that are experimenting, many times by the time they're 17, they've already seen enough that they're done. They're not going to do that. They have seen what it does to mom, dad, brother. They've had family members die from it. Have family members that are in really, really bad circumstances because of it. And so we have several who are adamantly opposed to drugs.
Yes, that does happen.
And not that that's a good thing, but
yes,
we are seeing some of that now, where kids have been watching this go on in their family for 15 years, and now they're old enough to go, oh, no, I don't want that. Not for me.
The aftercare, for drug addiction is the big challenging piece, because we can send people and get them dried out. But when they go back to that environment where their friends, their family members, and all of them are doing it, that becomes the biggest challenge. Because I can tell you, working through drug court and Day Report, that's that's probably the 90% main reason why a lot of them relapse and go back into addiction.
Perry, how is McDowell County Schools tracking child homelessness?
Okay, so every year, every school gets a form that shows them how to fill out for homelessness. And so they're sent home at the beginning of the year packet that every parent gets and every guardian gets. And so they fill those out, we get those back, and then they're entered into our school system's data file. So they're done electronically.
And how is homelessness impacting these young people's educational performance?
Their attendance is terrible. When we identify students that are homeless, that you can go back and look that there's a direct link to critical, or what we would call a student who is at high risk for dropout because their attendance is so poor.
23 states and Washington, D.C. has source of income laws that protect Section 8 voucher recipients from being discriminated against. Landlords can't refuse them. With housing rising sharply in Kanawha County, not sure about McDowell, do you think West Virginia should adopt such a statute to help get more people off the street, to find landlords to take their Section 8 voucher?
That's a challenging question, because if you're a landlord, you'd be like, oh, no, 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 because then I'm going to lose money. What I'm seeing in the southern part of West Virginia, I'm sure you both know that the Hatfield and McCoy trails are booming, and they're growing more and more. And I can tell you, as a person who used to rent in southern West Virginia, that made it challenging for me to find a place to rent. So instead of me paying you $400 or $500 a month, they can get $400 or $500 a week out of trail riders. So that's becoming a challenge so I don't know that it's discrimination per se, but I think it's the fact that they're looking at where they can get the best revenue.
But we go back to that again, that if you have some resources, there are lots of good people out there that, might not take a HUD voucher, but they'll rent, especially to a young person, for, $500 a month, which if you have a minimum wage job, that's about what you can do,
Yes.
And so that's part of our job too. Let's say people who are in this field, is to point that kids, if you will, into that direction, and to show them what to look for, because we don't want them to be victims of slumlords, and we don't want them to be paying every cent they own, and having living in shady places and, in dangerous places.
In Charleston, it's like the average rent for a good 2-bedroom apartment, $700, $800. If you get less than that, it's difficult to find a landlord that isn't a slumlord. That's the thing,
Yeah. And I don't know where you found $800, because I looked in Charleston for a place to rent, because I was going to pastor a church there in St. Albans area, and for a decent home, the best I could find was about $1,000 a month
for a 2-bedroom apartment.
Yeah. Yes.
Beth, you work a lot with homeless people who are young homeless people, in their teens to early 20s.
Right.
How do most of these young people wind up homeless and knocking on y'all's doors? Does the police bring them to you, or do they see like a sign somewhere and like call y'all up? Who refers them to you all?
Sometimes Child Protective Services, even though they might be 18, they might still be in foster care. Youth can sign, when a foster care youth, on the day they turn 18, they can sign themselves back into care. They can say, no, I want to stay in the system. I'm not ready. And so sometimes that happens. School counselors. Two recent young men that I've had recently were referred to me by their school counselor, one Riverside High School and one South Charleston High School. So the school counselors. We have a high school equivalency component to our program. It used to be called GED, but we don't do that anymore. So, but we have youth that are in that program, and so they're here every day, and they know what's going on in the other parts of the building. So they might say, "Oh, well, I have a friend who got kicked out, or I'm about to get kicked out." And so sometimes it happens that way too. Covenant House has a like a one-stop shopping type thing, centralized assessment. And so if a young person, 17, 18, 19-year-old person would walk into Covenant House and say, I'm homeless, then Covenant House would give me, or the people working there would give me a call. So
what's the outcomes with your clients?
Well, it's all over the board.
Do most of them remain stably housed?
Right now, I'm doing pretty good. I'll tell you what happened to me in August. I had 3 youth in my program in my apartments. I had one out in the community, but there were 3 in my upstairs apartments. And during 1 week, 2 of them left. One of them, I helped her move into an apartment on the west side. And, we got all her stuff together. We packed up the van. We drove across town. We had already seen it. She'd signed a lease, and it was a happy day. Then I think, and that was either Wednesday or Thursday. On Saturday, I took a young man to college.
Wow.
And he moved into a dormitory.
Cool deal.
He had a scholarship at a West Virginia college. It was a mixed blessing because it was the hottest day of the year. He had a dorm room on the 3rd floor of a non-air conditioned dorm with no elevator.
Oh, wow.
So, I didn't really enjoy that part of the day. But, when I left him and I said, "Hey, you're going to do great things." And so those 2, those were great things. I had one young man that left here I think he left here in May and went to the Marine Corps.
Cool deal.
And I had a young lady who had been in placement for a long time, had been in foster care for a long time, and she just really wanted to go home. And her team had decided that home was a safe place for her. And so she was here for a little while, but we were able to work things out so that she could make a safe transition home. And she was 17, so it wasn't like a child going back into that situation. I think that probably she went home and kind of became the grown-up, because she'd had a lot of help, and she'd gotten a lot of service and a lot of help and had learned a lot in her time in placement. So right now, I feel like our kids are doing good. If we're able to hang on to them for a little while and teach them some skills. I've got 3 in my independent living program right now. All 3 have jobs. So that's exciting. 2 of them are in school and 1 has graduated. So right now, I know I can't save everyone. None of us can,
No.
but right now I'm feeling pretty excited.
How many young people do you have to turn away, like from your program, because you don't have enough units and stuff?
Well, yeah, and that's sad.
Do you have to turn away a lot of young people?
I have a waiting list. I try not to say turn away. And sometimes I call back, and in the time between the time that they've contacted me and the time I have a place for them, they found another place, and that's great. She found a program one recently found a program in Wheeling.
How long is that waiting list?
Well, right now, I might have an opening in December, possibly.
That's
Based
not
on
too
where,
painfully long.
yeah, based on where everybody is right now, I could possibly have an opening in December. And I have 5 apartments, but I can only have enough funding right now for 3. So, if I could find a pot of money someplace, I have 2 more, I could do 2 more kids, and I'd love that. And that's in my independent living program. Of course, our other programs, Patchwork and Turning Point, that's a little bit different situation.
So what's going on in McDowell County when it comes to helping at-risk homeless youth, Harry?
For McDowell County, we are pretty blessed in that nature because people have been pretty generous about letting people stay with them. Um, I don't think that I've ever driven through the county where I've actually seen somebody sleeping on the street or in a under a bridge or anything like that. So I think a lot of times the generosity of the people have really, really taken that up. Now, how long that person's able to stay there kind of varies. So, like Beth said a while ago, they may end up bouncing from place to place to place, which I don't think's good for someone, and it's not stable because you don't always have that stable environment to go to. Um, but as far as I know, I think the community itself kind of meets that need right now.
It's I mean, it's getting colder.
It is.
Like as of this morning, it's getting colder. So, there will be an uptick.
What help is out there for young people besides y'all's programs that y'all are involved in?
Well, I think that most young people can always go to their school counselor, and the school counselor is a great resource because I think the counselors pretty much know, are a great way to refer youth and say, hey, you can do this, you can do this, you can go this and call here. School counselors are great. Churches, I know our church youth group, our youth pastor knows a lot too, so people, rec centers, after school programs, people that work with youth on a regular basis, if the kids will talk to those adults in those positions, I think they'd be surprised at how much the adults know, or at least know where to, who else they can talk to.
Yes, I agree with Beth. We have a lot of community partners that are ready. Our school counselors were always on top of things like that. We also have some social workers in our schools that are really good social workers that really know where the stuff is, know how to get the forms or get to the person. Uh, we were networked really, really well in McDowell County with different agencies for different plans and different things. And I believe me, there's people out there who's got a willing heart and who have the fun, have the resources. It's just Beth said it earlier, making sure to make those connections. And so there's a lot in our county.
Do y'all have a lot of LGBT youth knocking on y'all's doors?
We have a lot of kids that don't know whether or not don't know that yet. I mean, really, because that's kind of a standard thing that I may ask a youth, how do you identify? And they're like, oh, I don't know.
You hear it being a problem up in New England, but you don't, hear about it in West Virginia a lot.
I'm not going to say it's not a problem, but it's not a defining problem in my experience, in my recent experience, and a lot of children, adolescents aren't sure yet. And we're okay with that. I go, oh, okay. Well, let me know if you have a question, and we talk about safety, of course.
What about McDowell County?
I don't see it as a problem per se. I'm not saying there's not any problems with it because I know that we are very rich in culture as far as our religion and things go of that nature. So I'm sure there is some family conflicts over that because of belief systems. But I agree with Beth, especially right now. There's just so many different things coming at people of definitions of whether you're this, whether you're that, whether you're he, she, they, there, are, all these different pronouns. And so I think it's really confused a lot of our youth more than really give them a way or empower them to identify themselves.
Are
So
y'all
I
seeing
think
any
that,
migrant children? Homeless children?
no, we really don't have any issues with that in McDowell County either.
I have not heard of that. I mean, I'm not saying that we haven't seen it, but it's not been such that somebody has said, "Hey, you know what happened?" You know, it's if we had that, it wasn't communicated as an issue.
Beth, how does one get in touch with you to enter into one of your Daymark programs?
Well, you can go to our website, which is www.daymark.org. And I think you click on our people, and it has, you know, who you would call depending on what you want, or, you know, you can just call the main Daymark office, and I usually answer the phone. So that, and my number is 304-340-3675. And I will, if I can't help you, I'll point you in the right direction.
My takeaway from this week's episode on West Virginia child homelessness is that the people who are at the table dealing with it aren't too interested in long-term sustainable solutions to the problem that will likely morph from child to adult homelessness. Raising the minimum wage to a regional living wage would increase people's buying power and offset grocery and clothing costs, and stabilize local economies on top of alleviating a ton of poverty and homelessness. In terms of income housing discrimination, there's a ton of landlords that refuse Section 8 housing choice vouchers, not because they don't want to take them, but because HUD housing authorities won't allow voucher recipients to live in dilapidated housing. If we want to run slumlords out of business, the West Virginia legislature and legislatures all across the country should pass a law forbidding Section 8 voucher discrimination. And as far as encouraging young homeless folks to enlist in the military to survive, that's beyond crazy. Lots of West Virginians think they're going to escape all their woes here at home and create a world of opportunity for themselves by joining the military. Until their asses get sent off to fight in a needless war, if they don't come back dead or maimed, they bring the war home with them. Like this country needs more vets with PTSD and committing suicide. Yet who's the big demographic joining in the state? The poor. And they're dying or they're getting post-traumatic stress disorder for what? Free market capitalism. The mentality many West Virginians have when it comes to addressing poverty and homelessness is go knock on the door of a church or charity for help and give to them. The sad thing is, most West Virginia churches and charities that offer direct support services to those in need are not talking about self-sufficiency, economic diversification, ending harmful unfair trade deals, slumlords, living wages, pay inequality, affordable housing, expanding needle exchanges, mandatory paid leave, rent control, inclusionary housing and zoning, and ending Section 8 voucher discrimination. They're only interested in milking homelessness, poverty, drug addiction, and other societal ills. Out of all the charities offering direct support services in West Virginia, I'm only aware of two talking about living wages, affordable housing, and Medicare for all. Covenant House in Charleston and Harmony House in Huntington. That's pathetic. If you are a charity and you aren't talking about pay inequality, universal health care, living wages, affordable housing, and jumping on policymakers to address these problems, you aren't doing squat to put a dent into child or adult homelessness, poverty, drug addiction, crime, and helping to mend broken homes. You're only milking human suffering and aren't worthy of anyone giving you money. If you are a business and you want to help alleviate poverty and homelessness, instead of throwing money away on a bunch of sketchy charities, invest that money back into your workforce. especially if more than a fifth of your employees are working 2 jobs or more to get by. Your employees should be your number one priority, and charitable giving should be at the bottom of the totem pole. Paying your employees competitive living wages is how we systematically alleviate poverty and a host of other societal ills, including homelessness, both child and adult. I want to thank my guests, Beth Scohy and Dr. Perry Blankenship, for making me more cynical of churches and charities. Praise be to him. You can listen to the Mothman in the Bible Belt podcast on Spotify, YouTube, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and SoundCloud. Check out my website, mothmaninthebiblebelt.com, for updates on podcast outlets and also direct links to my social media. Thanks for listening.